So with this presentation, actually, I will make a motion to express our opposition to both of these legislations and authorize the representatives of the school committee, I don't know, Mrs. Black, or I will certainly go over there, Mrs. Black might do this as well, to go to the hearing and oppose both of these pieces of legislation. And so I will make a motion to oppose both of these pieces of legislation on behalf of the Tiverton School Committee.
Second.
And I think
There's a discussion now.
Yeah, I think the second piece of legislation needs to be separated because that deals specifically with the issue of
Continuation
of the contract. In other words, in the event that a successor collective bargaining agreement has not been agreed to by the parties and the existing contract shall continue in effect at such time as an agreement has been reached between the parties. Well, we have a court ruling right now that says the opposite, but you know, the question is, does the committee? I think you should take it as separate.
I will modify my motion to first deal with the binding arbitration, and then we will deal with the second one.
I think we can agree that when a contract expires, we still need to run our schools, and therefore we still need to have a pay schedule in place and terms and conditions of employment in place for our teachers. So one option, and the option that's generally been used, is to let the expired contract continue until a new one is negotiated. And in normal times, school committees are happy to use that option because it means there will be no salary increases. But I understand that in times of financial difficulty, such as we're currently experiencing, continuing the terms of an expired contract can be burdensome to a community, and that under these conditions, we would prefer a quick contract resolution. How do we resolve contracts quickly? There are two choices. The first is to have a neutral third party resolve the disputed contract items, and this is where binding arbitration, of course, goes. When this third party is required to take into account a community's ability to pay, this should act as a safeguard. I understand with police and fire binding arbitration has not always been responsive to economic stress. I would hope that we could craft legislation for teachers that would differ from police and fire binding arbitration to make it responsive to times of economic stress. Because if instead we reject both contract continuation and binding arbitration, the only option we have left is for the school committee to unilaterally impose terms. And I understand that dictating terms may seem very attractive, especially when you're the party dictating those terms, because reaching consensus can be a long and messy business, just like the democratic process can be a long and messy business, and dictating terms is very efficient by comparison. The problem with dictating terms is that dictators are not known for being benevolent. They are known for abusing power. And I'm not comfortable with a system that places all of the power in the hands of a very few people, even if I am one of those select few. I prefer a system where one group's power is instead subject to the checks and balances exerted by one or more other groups. So I am not prepared to oppose any form of binding arbitration for teachers. I think we should encourage our legislators to craft a workable binding arbitration bill for teachers in which we can feel confident that our interests will be protected as well as the interests of the teachers.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, I agree with what Ms. Herman said, but we have this bill in front of us right now, And it certainly isn't what you're looking for, as far as, looking for ability, be careful when you look for ability for the community to pay.
Well, that's not defined.
Because I think you'd be surprised
And
if you look into that for some of the communities.
I did notice, though, that the legislation has very strong language regarding strikes and work to rule, and that should this legislation pass, any teachers engaging in strikes or work to rule would face significant fines and termination. So that proposed legislation does address some of our concerns.
Like Massachusetts and Connecticut, different ones that have worked through it. But I'm saying, if they vote on this, that we have in front of us tonight, it won't have your concerns answered, but I have the same concerns.
Well, then I would
You know what I mean?
suggest that instead of writing a letter saying we oppose binding legislation, we write a letter saying we encourage them to draft a piece of legislation that protects our interests and our community's ability to pay, while still recognizing that we need resolution when contracts cannot be resolved between the teachers and school community. We need an option other than dictating terms.
Any further discussion? No? Okay, so,
Can I just,
Please.
it's just a point of clarification. One of the reasons for why we lost state aid in the proposed funding formulas was how the state calculated the town's ability to pay. Whether we like that formula or not, maybe they'll use another one if this were passed. But currently, what the state uses shows Tiverton's ability to pay because they use value of the community and mean income to run a combined total. And Tiverton's number, based on what the state looked at, they said, well, you can pay more. Now that's Rye, who I don't always agree with, but I think, you can argue with that formula, but I don't think they meant to stick anybody. They looked at the number. They looked at the number and said, well, you can pay more. So I'm concerned that if similar numbers are looked at by a panel or an arbitrator, they're going to say, we don't care, town, what you think you can afford. We're looking at what you can afford, and then base a decision on that.
That's a very
And while I agree that there needs to be a mechanism to kind of solve this logjam somehow, this piece of legislation,
It's very one.
I don't personally. I don't vote, but I don't see that being accomplished with this piece. I'm just concerned that it's going to drive the cost for communities up. And in our light of our economic times,
Well, would you be open to amending the motion to say we oppose this particular piece of binding arbitration legislation because it does not have sufficient safeguards for the community in terms of sufficient financial safeguards in times of financial hardship?
nope.
I made the motion.
I made the motion. I believe that until I see some bill that does have these safeguards, which this is not going to, this particular pursuit, it's not going to kill right here, even if this is not going to pass the committee, it's going to be coming up again and again at some point.
And you oppose it in no matter what form it appears?
Oh, no, but until I see it, what it is, then